Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on just this upcoming DC universe. So at the beginning of this past week, we got a decent sized update from both James Gunn and not David Safran, Peter Safran. I was going to say David Zaslav and Peter Safran, the co-heads of DC Studios, where they clarified a bunch of previously reported information, as well as announcing some smaller animated TV projects to play into sort of that younger market, and also confirming a project like the Teen Titans film, which had been reported quite a while ago, but they hadn't really acknowledged at all. But one thing they also confirmed is that they have a 6-year plan, presumably, I guess, starting at the release of Superman in July, and that will lead up to an event-style film. Now, Gunn reportedly said Avengers level. I think he might have said that to Hollywood Reporter. I think that's the site that people are using, that he used the quote Avengers level, but it's been spun by some other outlets as Avengers Endgame level that some outlets have put out there, which I thought was a bit much. It's like, really? He's going for an Endgame level event after 6 years? So what's after that? You know, that's pretty early to do something that big. So Avengers level, that's what he said. So that's a big movie, an event movie, but not a massive movie like Endgame, where everything's like a culmination movie. Like this is meant to be like an end of chapter movie, not a end of the complete story movie like Endgame was. Now, there are many saying that 6 years isn't enough to lead up to an event like that, but from 2026 onwards, so not this year, we have Superman and Peacemaker season 2, but from next year onwards, they are aiming to have 2 films and two TV shows directly connected to the DCU and the story it's telling. So next year, Supergirl and Clayface are meant to be the 2 movies, and Lanterns and presumably the Waller show are meant to be the 2 shows. Of course, Waller's got a question mark on it, as if that will come out, but it's meant to, at least from what we know. But yeah, so 2 films and 2 TV shows each year directly connected to the DCU and the story it's telling. I mean, by the time we get 6 years in, that's a lot of projects. So that will quickly build up to a pretty full amount of projects leading up to that 6-year mark. But what could that Avenger level, event film be? Would it be a one and done, just a maybe like 2.5, 3 hour film? Or would it be over 2 parts maybe? Well, that's probably another question for further down the track when we know exactly what they're doing. But I guess the big question is simply who would be involved in that event film, like what characters? Well, let's have a talk and discussion about it. I have 4 options written down in regards to what style of event film they could do. And I think they're pretty logical options, and they're not, too big. If you want, or like they're not small, but they're not trying to make it like the end of the sort of day sort of thing. But I think they're logical options that a bunch of people would think of yourselves, or you would jump onto when you hear it. But if you have any additions, of course, let me know them in the comment section down below, as well as any opinions you have on my stuff. And if you're going to enjoy the video, drop a like, takes 2 seconds. So the first event out of the 4 is a pretty simple one. It's probably the one that people jump to the most. It's the most logical one when you think, oh, Avengers level event, but in the DC, well, Justice League. Now, the Justice League is a big question mark when it comes to James Gunn's DCU, because we don't know necessarily what angle he's going to attack it at. And by that I mean, is he going to go for a very contained Justice League? And when I say contained, I mean there's a limited amount of members. There's only 6, 7, maybe 8 if you want to push it. Or is it open like the Justice League Unlimited thing, where you might see a person that's in the Justice League that normally wouldn't, but it's in a larger group. So it's just like what heroes are more suitable for certain, threats and stuff like that, or who's available, or who just gets involved. I have a feeling, once again, it's probably for us to wait until we get a bit more into these projects, because we don't know necessarily like what characters will be liked and just what characters work well together. But I would assume it's probably going to be a contained Justice League, at least to start off at the beginning, especially if it's like the first time a bunch of these heroes are working together or even talking to each other in any way, shape or form. But because of that Justice League Unlimited thing, and Gunn seems to be tapping into that early 2000s, mid 2000s nostalgia, there is the high option for that. I think we'll eventually get there. I think we'll get to the point in this DCU where it's very much like the Justice League is just like a membership sort of thing. It's not limited to 7 people. If you're a hero and they want you in the Justice League, and there can be like 100 to 150 heroes, I think we'll eventually get there, but I think we might start with a contained option. In regards to who the threat is, where the Justice League need to come together, I mean, there's some obvious ones, like Legion of Doom is one that I think a lot of people want to see. I don't know if we would have been built up to that point 6 years in. I guess it depends who's the villains in the movies and like what's Lex Luthor doing and stuff like that. But a Legion of Doom thing would be cool, especially if it is like 7 Legion of Doom or 8 Legion of Doom versus like 7 or 8 Justice League members. I think that's pretty fitting. I think it's easier to do Legion of Doom with a contained Justice League than like 8 to 9 villains and then like 100, 200 heroes. You want to make it fairly even and a bit, a bit competitive at the very least. Darkseid's another obvious one. I feel like Darkseid's one you save till a bit later though. or you involve him with another one of these options. So I wouldn't do Darkseid with Justice League specifically, at least this early on. I think that's either you leave it for a bit later if you're doing Justice League versus Darkseid, or you include him with another option here. And the final one is just, I have to mention the villain because it's just been mentioned and rumored as a main threat in this DCU, if not the main threat in this first chapter, though. We'll have to wait and see further down the line if that plays out, and that's the character of the Center. It's been a big discussion point. It hasn't been confirmed or denied, but I have to include it. We'll see how it goes. It's maybe a bit similar to some other things we've seen previously by Gunn with DC properties, like what we saw in the Suicide Squad and then even in Peacemaker season 1 as well. But it works. It works for a big threat, so I have to wait and see there. The second option of these events, some people might think this is small, but I think it'd be a big moment, especially because it's something that was attempted but not done in the way that people wanted, and that's World's Finest. Now, of course, this would be sort of playing off like Batman v Superman, but you'd want this to be sort of like a flip on that, where maybe they're a bit at each other's necks for like when they first meet, or there's like a moral thing, but then they work together for majority of the film. Not what Batman v Superman was, where they're against each other for like 90% and then team up at the end. Batman and Superman teaming up, it's something that people really want, especially for a consistent long period, and it's just them working together. And probably for the first time, I think that's the way you would do it in World's Finest. Like maybe they know of each other, like especially Superman should know of Batman. But I think you would still have it like this is the first time they're actually properly doing anything together. I think that's the way to do it. And it's just to fight a common threat. You know, I don't think it has to be that deep, but I think you have to make it realistic, where it's somewhere, it's a threat where Batman would need to be involved, but also Superman. It's not someone that Superman can just take out, or there's some more maybe like questions of morality or something around it. That'd be very interesting, especially considering the difference between the two characters of Batman and Superman. But also in this movie, to make it feel a bit more like event style, you can include other heroes just in smaller parts. So, you know, that's if needed, of course. You don't force them in, but if needed, you know, that you include them in smaller parts. But you have to make it that Batman and Superman are by far and just very clearly the two leads. Like it's clearly a Batman and Superman movie. It's not Batman, Superman, and some friends, you know, for a decent chunk of it. Like if you're gonna have some other heroes there, maybe they're there in like the opening act, and that's about it. And then the rest of it is Batman and Superman fighting a common cause. I think that'd be really cool, and I think it'd be something that people would really want to see. The third option, or the second last option, is a simple one, and it's Crisis. And this just allows you to include characters that would function outside of a standard Justice League, especially, as I said before, they go for a bit of a contained one, at least to start off. Now, by Crisis, I don't mean Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis, I feel, should just be like what they call event films in this DCU. So I even think if they did, like if you do World's Finest, fair enough, just keep it World's Finest. But even if they did a Justice League thing, I think Crisis is the cool way to do it, and it makes it sort of fit. And, you know, and just because it allows you to use those other characters outside of there as well. Now, with this, there are like various Crisis events in the comics. I don't think you have to base it off a specific comic. It might be better if you don't, to be completely honest. I think like just creating it and using it in your world and stuff, but using the term Crisis, like Crisis, this, that, and the other, or something Crisis, is the way to do it. You know, the way to do it. But just use the term Crisis as a like a universe-wide involved event. You know, small and big characters being involved. I think that would be a way to make it a fairly consistent thing. But also, I think if you use the term Crisis, it has to be special. So you just don't chuck Crisis in there to go, just call it this, that Crisis or whatever. It has to be special. It almost has to earn the name Crisis, in my opinion. But I think that's an interesting thing to do. But this is, I said before, with Darkseid, if you didn't use Darkseid in Justice League, because I think it might be a bit too early for him just to verse the Justice League, you could use him in a Crisis film. Now that would probably tie into like maybe some like wider things, which like, do they have enough time to build it up at that point? Probably not. So once again, even with Crisis, I don't think this will be the first event. They could, but this is something that I could see them doing like in the next event film after this first one. And the final one to include, just because a lot of people would include it, and it's just a logical one when you think of comic book movies, especially nowadays, but even specifically DC, and you wanted to do a big film multiverse. Now, the thing is, I doubt heavily that this will be the first big event film. It just seems so unlikely. Gunn doesn't seem to be touching anything multiverse, at least from what we know. He seems to be avoiding a character like the Flash, which taps into the multiverse and stuff like that. I think they're avoiding that. Which, you know what? I think that's fair enough. I think especially with like that's what Marvel's doing in the moment and stuff like that, and like DC to try it like tried a little bit of it towards the end of the DCEU, and it's been touched upon a lot in TV and stuff. Leave the multiverse, build up your main universe, then you can touch upon that in like 10 years, 12 years time or something like that. But for now, I think probably just keep it to your main universe. But I had to include it because it's an option that a lot of people would think of. Just for me, I just think it's unnecessary this early on at the very least. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it, show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on everything we went over. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I will catch you guys later. Goodbye.